Hello, welcome to a new Creature3D tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to rig up or set up a character in Creature3D. This is the first of the series of tutorials for Creature3D, so join me in exploring the power of the Creature3D animation tool. So, the first thing I'm going to do when actually creating a Creature 3D animation is to actually create the rig of the character, because the rig of the character is going to allow us to actually control the character with our motors or animation tools later on. Before we start in Creature3D, obviously I've loaded it up. The first thing I'm going to do is create a new project. This is required in order to start anything in Creature3D. So I'm going to start a new project. I'll call it test. Okay. Alright, so this is a new project. Now, after I've done that, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import in the character model. I'm going to be using a sample character model from the GLTF repository. Obviously, you can use any character you want. Creature3D allows you to actually import in three kinds of file formats. GLTF, which is the standard open sourced rigging mesh animation format, FBX, which is Autodesk's rigging animation mesh format, and OBJ, which is a plain mesh. So currently it supports three kinds of file formats. I'm going to pick GLTF, and I'm going to import this fish, which is a very simple character, very simple mesh. It has no rigging, it's just a simple mesh, as we can see in what we're seeing on screen right now. Now, you can see when you import the character mesh in, there are no textures. I can obviously add a texture in. So what I do is I go into Scene Objects, and in the Scene browser, I just select the mesh. So under meshes, these are all the meshes, the sub-meshes that this character has. I can select the mesh. Now, in the mesh itself, in object properties, I can change the various properties of this object. I can obviously change the color. So let's say I want to make it to green. There I have a green fish. If I wanted to make it blue, I will have a blue fish, and so on and so forth. But we're here to actually add the texture onto the fish. So very easily, look at the texture bar over here and click on Set Texture, and then select the texture you want from your repository or your folder. And there you have it. Now I have a textured fish. Okay, to save, I press Control S, and that saves the project. Okay, so this is a plain mesh without any bones. Obviously, we cannot animate with this rig because it doesn't have actually rigging. It doesn't have any bones on it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to proceed to add in some bones into this fish. And what do? We click on Mode, and we go to Rig. Okay, so welcome to the rigging mode of Creature3D. As you can see, I can rotate around the character. To rotate around the character, I hold down Alt and I drag my mouse. Right? So that's rotating. And similarly, while Alt is pressed down, if I right-click on the rightmost mouse button, if I drag it, that zooms in and zooms out. And to actually translate around the character is hold down the Alt and the middle mouse button, and that translates around. So very simple, very standard controls. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to start adding bones to this character, basically the process of rigging this character. You can see on the right-hand side of the screen in the Scene Objects browser, under Bones, there's nothing. So the first thing we want to do is to switch over to the Bones mode under this tab in the Mesh Weighting Inspector. So click on Bones, and this mode allows you to actually add the bones. What I want to do first is I want to select the mesh to add, so I can have some kind of selection, and then I'm going to add the bones. Now, there are two ways to add the bones. You can either use the mouse or a shortcut. So with the mouse, you simply just move your mouse over to the Add Bone button and click OK, and there you have it. This is a bone. This is the root bone with the first bone of the character. I can drag it around, as you can see, with this widget, and that's it. That's really simple. Now, obviously, clicking the mouse is fine, but it's not very convenient, especially if you're trying to add lots of bones and you don't want RSI. So there are shortcuts in Creature3D which allow you to do these various bone operations. The one that you want to be familiar with is obviously adding a bone, which is pressing A. So I press A, that adds another bone, and you notice bone 1 is a child of bone 0. So it's whatever bone you selected. If you add a bone, it's going to go under that as a parent. So now I can drag bone 1 in, that's a child of bone 0, and I can proceed to add more bones. See how I'm adding various bones for this fish, right? For the tail, So I can add a series of bones. Oh, I made a mistake here. What do I do? Well, I can undo it. So just Control Z, undo that. Yeah, very simple. Okay, so these are the bones of the tail. I want to do similar things. This time around, I select a parent as bone 1, and I want to make bones in front to stretch along the head of the fish. So same thing, A again. I go in, I start adding these bones, right? And again, I want to add bones for the top of the fish. So same thing again. I drag some bones over, I add them. Very, very simple stuff. It's not rocket science. It's very simple to add these bones. I'll do the ones for the fins below as well. Right? And of course, here as well. Okay, so just have a bone structure that sort of stretches across the fish. And then I can save it. Control S, and that saves the bone rig. Okay, so now that the bones have been added, what I'm going to do now is I want to actually start weighting the mesh. This means because I want to actually drive the mesh of the fish with the rig. So basically I want to say how much of the vertices or the points on this mesh are affected by each individual bone of the fish. And that's a process of mesh weighting or bone weighting, if you want to call it. Now there's various ways to do the weighting operation in Creature3D. There's the manual way, which is you go in and paint, or there's the auto way. The auto way, actually what it does is it actually puts in a bunch of these cylindrical objects. They might not be very precise or exact, but they're somewhere there. And based off these cylindrical objects, you can actually size these cylindrical objects, and any point within the cylinder will actually be weighted to that bone. So what you normally do, or what I prefer, is I use this mode, to use the auto weighting mode, to automatically sort of give a rough pass to the weighting, and then I can go in to manually weight and paint the vertices that I missed out. So let's try auto weighting first. Now in auto weighting mode, as you can see, I can go in and select these various bones, right? And you can see the cylinder that's highlighted with it. I can also easily only show the selected cylinder by moving a mouse to draw all, and it only shows that cylinder I care about. Or I can show all cylinders. Now the game we're trying to play here is to make sure the cylinders actually encapsulate all the vertices of the fish. So that means you painted every single vertex. Missing vertices will not be weighted, and that's a bad thing because then your rig will have issues. So the first thing we want to do is for each cylinder we can actually adjust the radius and the scale, how large it encompasses. Now for the root bone, typically what I want to do is I don't actually want any influence at all. I want the rest of the bones to affect the fish, but for root bone I don't really care. So I'm going to set the radius to be something really, really tiny, like so. Okay, that's only for the root bone. Now for the rest of the bones, I want to scale them up. I can obviously scale them up individually. For example, I can come here and I can adjust the radius, or I can just do an all scale, like so, and this will scale up all the bones at once. This is like a global scale, so you can do a local and global scale to fine-tune your needs for the auto weighting. Okay, so let's actually start fine-tuning some of the auto weighting parameters. If we look at this, let's pick a bone. For example, this bone over here, you can see it's very short, this cylinder, right? The cylinder is very short. We actually want the cylinder to encompass more of the fish, more volume of the fish. So what we do is we go into the start and end offset. These two parameters actually decide how stretched out the cylinder actually is in various XYZ local coordinate frames. So if I go in and I add a value, say 0.1, you notice it stretches out. See that? It stretches out over here. And I can easily put this as put a number as well for the other side, and it stretches out to the other side as well. So that's pretty cool. So I can go in, I can try to stretch these guys. Right? I can stretch these guys out very easily, so it covers more of the fish. And it's okay for them to overlap, because I can always fine-tune the weighting later on to make it properly painted. So go ahead and don't worry about it. Same thing from here. I'm going to stretch this as well. So I'm going to go in and start stretching all of these cylinders to make them cover more of the fish, actually. Okay, and of course I am going to up the scale so it covers more of the fish, like so. That might be good enough, and you'll see in a moment what we're going to do. So once, okay, maybe let's take it down a bit. It's a bit a bit too much. Okay, so all scale is like 4.5, and so once this is done, what we do is we move our mouse over to the Run for All Bones button. We click on it, and this weighs each bone. So if I come here, you can see what the influence of each bone has on the mesh. The red vertices, the red painted regions, are the unweighted places, unweighted regions, and that's bad. So we want to be able to fix those, right? We want to be able to fix those. And how do we fix those? Well, obviously the most precise way is now to do manual weighting. So let's do manual weighting, which is we're going to come in to, we're in auto weighting mode. We're going to go to manual weighting mode, and we're going to come in and paint the remaining red vertices. So what we do here is we go into manual weighting mode, we adjust the radius of our paintbrush so it's a bit larger. You can always make it even larger, like 80. I'll rotate around, and then for each bone you can check the influence. For example, this bone, I want to paint the top part of the fish to be influenced by that. So I hold down Shift and then I just start dragging and painting. Very simple, right? Very simple. Yeah. Rotate the fish around and we're good. So let's do similar things for the bone below. I'm going to paint, of course, and paint this guy as well. Yeah. Okay. Now let's do the one below as well. Okay, that's good. And we're going to fill in the blanks for this guy as well. Very nice and simple. Just filling up all the empty regions. Oh, undo that. So you can always undo operations, undo places which you mistakenly painted easily. Right? So, okay, cool. So that is those are the painted regions. So that was in manual mode. Now, if you want to check to see whether you've correctly painted all your points, the easiest way to do it in Creature3D is to go under the meshes and click on the mesh itself, and you can see in this window here it will tell you how many points are not weighted. The good thing here is it's simple mesh, so it says 0 points are not weighted. Looks like I successfully painted all the points. You can also do a bit of fixing by going to auto mode, and if let's say you missed all the points, you don't know where the points are, Creature can actually help you attempt to fix them, although it's not 100% accurate, but it's good for the final touch-ups. And there's a button here called Fix Auto Weight Unweighted Points, which will actually help you do exactly that. So this will actually help you fix points which are, you missed out for whatever reason. So it's a very useful tool. You'll try to find the closest cylinder to paint it. But of course, if you want to be very precise, you're going to have to manually paint it. So now that we actually have this rig painted out, we can test out the results of our rigging. What we do is we move our mouse over to the test mode in the test tab over here, and you can click different bones, and then you can just drag them around to see how the rig responds to different deformations, which looks kind of cool, right? It looks like it's mostly working. I think that's quite exciting. Yeah. Okay. Looks like we did a pretty good job. I'm going to save this. Now, obviously, just painting might not be good enough for you. Sometimes you want the weights to be very smooth, and of course, there are smoothing operations in Creature3D. Now, in the manual mode, there is actually a smooth bone weight button. Click on it, and this will actually smooth the bone weight. So if you want just an extra level of smoothness, I recommend doing this as well. Right, so we just smooth out the bone weight. So the deformations just look just a bit better, which I recommend. So now we can go back and test it. Let's see what we get. Let's try again, because I deformed it too much. Okay, that looks good. Yep, look how the weights are smoothed out, and it looks reasonable. Yeah, we have our fish which is deforming in test mode. Obviously it won't be perfect because this is just a simple round of weighting, but you can already see it's coming together quite nicely. Right? You can test out your different the results of your meshing and rigging just with this test feature alone, which I think is very, very useful. Now, obviously, in this case, I might actually want the top fin to be influencing more of it. So I'm going to come in back here, and I am going to also paint the top fin as well, so that there's more influence for both of it. Okay, and I'm going to smooth it, and let's test it. There, that's. Oh, I think this part also needs to be influenced, but you get the idea. So I'm going to go in and also paint more of it. Okay, that's more reasonable. Yep, that's more reasonable. And yeah, so you can see I can just keep basically doing different kinds of smoothing operations to get a good result. And eventually I'll get somewhere. That's the goal of rigging. So I can keep fine-tuning until the results look reasonable, and then I'm done. And then we can, yeah, okay, that looks good now. And then we can go to animation. Okay, so this basically ends the mesh and rigging tutorial. I hope you found it very useful, and I took you through the whole phase of importing a GLTF or FBX or OBJ mesh or rig, going to Creature, adding the bones, and then either auto-weighting or manually painting the rig, and then we can go and test it with test mode. I hope this was very useful. Stay tuned for other tutorials. Thanks for watching.